The Carolina sun bore down hard, heavy with summer heat, baking the parade ground until the air shimmered above the asphalt. Sweat clung beneath stiff collars, trickled down temples, and dampened the backs of fatigues. Still, every Marine recruit stood at attention, boots aligned, eyes forward. Maria Martinez stood among them, her jaw clenched tight enough to ache. Her uniform sleeves were rolled neatly to regulation length, and beneath that thin fabric lay the one thing she could never hide: scars. They ran jagged and uneven down her forearm, pale and ridged against her darker skin, marks left behind by fire years ago. She had considered asking for a medical exemption that would allow her to keep her sleeves unrolled, but that wasn't Maria. She hadn't come here to ask for exceptions. She had come to prove something to herself, to her family, and maybe even to ghosts she never spoke about aloud. The first whisper started at her left. "Look at that arm," a young recruit muttered, too low for the drill instructor to hear. Another snickered. "Man, looks like she tried cooking with dynamite." A ripple of laughter moved through the line. Maria didn't turn her head, didn't break formation. Her eyes fixed on the horizon, her breathing steady but sharp in her chest. It wasn't the first time she'd heard it, not even the 10th. Every day since arriving at Camp Lejeune, her scars had been the subject of someone's amusement. One recruit, taller than the rest with a shaved head and too much arrogance, leaned just enough to whisper, "Careful. She might burn down the barracks if you make her mad." A burst of laughter followed. Maria's jaw tightened. Her fists curled at her sides until the veins stood out against the scars. She forced herself to breathe. She could endure this. She had endured worse. The drill sergeant's bark cracked through the heat like a whip. "Lock it up." The recruits snapped silent, all eyes front. The laughter died as though it had never existed, but Maria still felt its sting echoing in her chest. When the drill sergeant's back was turned again, one of the jokers smirked at her, mouthing words she didn't need to hear aloud to understand. Freak. Weak. Broken. She swallowed it whole, burying the anger deep where it couldn't show. Marines weren't supposed to break. Later that night, the barracks buzzed with the sounds of exhausted bodies collapsing onto bunks. Boots hit the floor, rifles clanked as they were set down, and the room slowly dimmed into the uneasy quiet of shared exhaustion. Maria sat on her bunk, unrolling her sleeves, rubbing her sore forearms. The scars caught the fluorescent light, raised ridges casting tiny shadows on her skin. She traced one absent-mindedly, not out of vanity, but memory. She was 12 again, the smell of smoke choking her lungs. Flames licked the walls of the small Texas house she'd grown up in, her mother's screams barely audible through the roar. Her younger brother had been trapped in his room. Maria had gone back for him, skin searing as she pushed through fire, wrapping him in a blanket and carrying him out into the night air. She remembered the pain, the hospital, the doctors shaking their heads, telling her she was lucky to live, lucky her arm hadn't been lost. Lucky, they kept saying. She had never felt lucky. A bunk creaked across the room, breaking her memory. 2 recruits sat whispering. Maria heard her name in the middle of their conversation, followed by a muffled laugh. She closed her eyes, counted her breaths. They didn't know. They couldn't. But someday, she thought, they would understand. The next morning, training. Drills began at dawn. The recruits were dragged from bunks, lined up, and ordered into the yard. Sweat soaked through uniforms within minutes as they ran drills under the relentless sun. Maria ran with them, legs pounding, lungs burning. She wasn't the fastest, but she never slowed. She refused to give them the satisfaction. Beside her, one of the same recruits from the day before stumbled, falling behind. Maria pushed forward, silent determination etched on her face. She knew they were watching her, waiting for her to falter. She wouldn't. During a break, while canteens passed from hand to hand, one recruit leaned close. "Hey, Martinez," he sneered. "You sure that arm can even keep up? Or are you just here to make us look good?" The others chuckled. Maria turned, meeting his gaze evenly. For a moment, her dark eyes hardened, but her voice stayed calm. "This arm's carried. More than you ever have," she said, quiet but sharp as steel. The laughter faltered, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. She drank from her canteen, turned away, and let the words sink in. That night, she lay awake listening to the rhythm of breathing in the barracks. She thought of home, of her mother, working 2 jobs, of her brother, who still had nightmares about the fire, of the promise she'd made herself after recovering. She wasn't here just to serve. She was here to prove that scars didn't define limits. She would not let them. Her arm itched faintly, the skin forever different, forever reminding her of what she'd survived. She pressed her palm against it, grounding herself in the reality that those scars were not weakness. They were proof. The following days blended together: long runs, weapons training, inspections. Maria endured them all with the same silent determination. The jokes continued, though less bold when drill sergeants were near. Still, she heard them. "Careful, don't let her near the stove. Bet she cries if she smells smoke." Each jab was a spark against her patience, but she never let them see it burn. One evening, after a particularly brutal day, Maria sat polishing her boots. The recruit who mocked her most often passed by and muttered, "You don't belong here. Scars mean you're broken. Marines don't take broken people." Maria didn't look up. She kept polishing until her boots gleamed like mirrors. Then she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "Marines take people who survive, and I'm still here." The recruit frowned, but said nothing. Maria knew then that respect wasn't something she could demand. It wasn't in retorts, or in silence. It was in the miles she ran, the drills she completed, the discipline she carried like armor. One day, she thought, those same voices that mocked her would have no choice but to fall silent. But for now, as she lay back on her bunk and stared at the scars twisting across her arm, she carried a quiet fire inside. They thought those scars made her weaker. They were wrong. They were the very reason she was stronger. And she was just getting started. The sun rose again, burning bright over the training yard at Camp Leoing, casting long shadows of the barracks and drills. Sweat dripped down Maria's back as she fell into formation, arms straight at her sides, chin level, eyes forward. The previous day's laughter still echoed in her mind, but she refused to let it break her focus. She tightened her fists, feeling the rough ridges of her scars press against her palms. They were her history, her proof, and she would not let anyone reduce them to mockery. A group of recruits lingered nearby, whispering just low enough to escape the drill instructor's sharp eyes. "Check out Martinez," one muttered, nudging another. "Do you think she can even handle the obstacle course without tripping over her own arms?" Maria's ears twitched. She didn't flinch. She had learned long ago to ignore the noise, to let the words roll off her back like water on metal. But they still pricked at her pride. She didn't just want to prove them wrong. She wanted to make them understand. The obstacle course loomed ahead like a wall of fire. The wooden planks, rope climbs, and balance beams seemed designed to break even the strongest recruits. Maria approached it with measured steps, keeping her breathing steady, each movement precise. Every stretch of muscle burned, every footfall a reminder that she was different from them. Not weaker, just tempered by her own history. A recruit, with a mocking grin, leaned over the edge of the starting platform. "Bet she fall first." "Don't let your burned-up arms get in the way," he called. Maria didn't respond. She adjusted her grip on the rope, swung herself upward, and climbed, feeling the strain in her shoulders, arms, and legs. Each step was deliberate, each motion controlled. She knew the eyes were on her. Let them watch. By the time she reached the top, she was breathing hard, heart pounding, but her gaze remained steady. She balanced along the narrow beam, arms out, scars catching the sunlight, tracing the path of her survival. She didn't stumble. She didn't hesitate. And when she hit the ground on the other side, landing solidly, the whispering ceased for a moment. During the following days, Maria continued to face subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, ridicule. At meal times, whispers followed her tray, subtle jabs thrown in between bites. Better not let her near the oven in the chow hall. We don't. Want a repeat of last time? Someone murmured with a smirk. Her response was simple. Silence. Words were unnecessary. Her actions spoke louder than their jokes ever could. She pushed herself harder in every drill, ran longer, lifted heavier, and endured pain without complaint. She didn't let the mockery define her performance. It only fueled her determination. One evening, she was assigned to clean the weapons. With another recruit, the one who had mocked her the most. The air was thick with tension, and the smell of gun oil and metal filled their senses. He smirked, glancing at her forearms. Still got those ugly scars, huh? Guess they'll make you a good target if we ever go live. Maria's hands moved steadily, cleaning and inspecting, never looking up. Finally, she spoke, her voice low, but calm. You might want to focus on your rifle. Mine will still function if I fall. Yours won't if you can't even respect the person next to you. The smirk faltered. He didn't respond. He didn't know what to say. She returned her gaze to the weapon, each motion precise, letting her competence speak instead of words. Night fell, and the barracks grew quiet. Maria lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, letting her thoughts drift. She thought about the fire that had taken everything from her when she was 12, the smoke, the flames, the terror of not being able to save everyone. But she had. She had pulled her siblings out, saved them, even when her own body screamed. In pain. And now, years later, she was facing a different kind of fire. One made of ridicule, whispers, and judgment. But she wasn't afraid. Her scars weren't shame. They were proof. And she would make sure that, eventually, everyone who doubted her knew it. The next day brought a grueling march across the training grounds. The sun glared down mercilessly, boots pounding against the dirt as the recruits fell into a steady rhythm. Maria kept her pace, careful not to stumble. Around her, recruits were already dropping, exhaustion painting their faces with pale streaks. Martinez, keep up, the sane smirking recruit shouted, trying to provoke her. Maria didn't glance his way. She simply kept walking, her breathing controlled, her body moving as though the fire in her past had already conditioned her for any challenge. The others began to slow, some grumbling under the weight of their packs. Maria pressed on. She knew she could endure longer. She always had. By the time they reached the end, Maria was not only intact but composed. The others were panting, dripping with sweat, some limping from blisters and exhaustion. She landed lightly on the ground, dust swirling around her boots. Her scars burned faintly from the sun, but they were reminders, not weaknesses. Over the next few days, small shifts began to appear. Some recruits stopped whispering as often, while others glanced at her with a grudging respect they didn't yet understand. She wasn't looking for their approval. She was looking to prove, mostly to herself, that she could survive, that she could thrive in the Marine Corps, despite their doubts. One afternoon, she was assigned to lead a small group through a tactical drill. Her group consisted of 3 recruits who had previously mocked her. As they moved through the exercise, she maintained control, giving clear, precise instructions. Her voice was calm, unwavering, and the team followed her without question. When they completed the exercise without error, one of them, a recruit, who had been the harshest critic, looked at her and muttered, "Okay, maybe she's not so bad after all." Maria didn't smile. She didn't need to. Actions had already spoken louder than words. At night, the barracks were quiet again. Maria sat on her bunk, writing a letter to her younger brother, the one she had saved from the fire years ago. She described the day's drills, the march, the endurance runs. She didn't mention the ridicule. He didn't need to know that. Instead, she wrote about resilience, about how scars weren't shameful, and how strength often came from surviving battles that others couldn't even see. After sealing the envelope, she traced her scars lightly with her fingers. They were hers alone, symbols of endurance, courage, and the battles she had fought long before the Marines had even known her name. The turning point came quietly, almost imperceptibly. During a morning drill, a decorated sergeant walked past her formation, eyeing each recruit. When his gaze landed on Maria, he paused. His brow furrowed as he noticed the scars twisting down her arm. There was no laughter in his eyes, no smirk, only recognition. For a moment, the world seemed to hush around her. Maria held her stance, breathing steady, not out of fear, but anticipation. Someone finally saw what her scars truly meant. That evening, a few Marines who had mocked her approached, awkward and uncertain. "Hey, sorry about before," one said, voice low. "We didn't mean." Maria nodded slightly. She didn't need more. Respect, she had learned, was earned over time, not begged for in apologies. She continued her drills, ran her laps, and endured the physical strain. Each day was a test, not just of her body, but of her resolve. And every day she proved herself. By the time she collapsed into her bunk each night, she didn't just feel exhaustion. She felt accomplishment, resilience, and quiet pride. The laughter, the whispers, the mockery, they had begun to lose their power. And yet, Maria knew the true test was still ahead. Someone higher up, the kind of person who didn't just see outward appearance, would have to notice. Only then could the mockery truly end. But she was ready. Her scars had taught her that survival demanded patience, endurance, and courage. The Marines might have laughed at her arm, her history, her pain. But Maria had endured fire, trauma, and doubt, and she would endure this too. The scars that had once been a source of mockery were slowly becoming a symbol. And Maria Martinez would make sure everyone in her path understood exactly what that symbol meant. The morning air was thick with anticipation, heavy with the scent of polished boots, freshly pressed uniforms, and the faint tongue of sweat. The sun had barely climbed over the horizon, casting long shadows across the parade ground. Each recruit moved with precision, adjusting their stances, straightening collars, and ensuring that every crease in their fatigues aligned perfectly. Maria Martinez stepped onto the yard, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. She could feel the heat prickling her skin, the tension in her muscles a mirror of the tight knot in her stomach. Today was inspection day, a ritual of precision, discipline, and scrutiny that could make or break reputations. For some, it was routine. For Maria, it was another stage in a battle she had been fighting silently for years. Her sleeves were rolled to regulation, her scars twisting down her forearm, like the story of her survival etched in skin. She kept her gaze forward, refusing to acknowledge the whispers, the side glances, the subtle smirks from a few recruits, who still carried last week's jokes like badges of misplaced pride. The drill sergeant barked orders. Formation. Eyes front. Don't move a muscle. His voice cut through the yard like a whip, demanding absolute attention. Maria obeyed, every nerve alert, every muscle engaged. The others shifted nervously, sensing a tension that went beyond normal inspection jitters. Then, a new sound reached their ears, something unfamiliar. Heavy boots, deliberate and authoritative, striking the ground with unmistakable power. Heads turned, curiosity and apprehension blending into a collective unease. A decorated general had arrived, unannounced. He moved with a kind of presence that demanded silence before a word was spoken. His uniform gleamed, metals catching the early morning light, eyes sharp and unwavering. The yard seemed to shrink under his gaze. The usual sounds, the shuffling of feet, whispered jokes, even the heat of summer faded into the background. Maria felt it immediately. Every muscle in her body tensed, not from fear, but from recognition of authority, of the weight of judgment that wasn't arbitrary. She adjusted her stance instinctively, boots planted firmly, shin level. She could almost feel his gaze sweeping across the formation, missing nothing, every detail inspected with precision and intent. He stopped at the front of the line, and for a moment, Maria thought he might pass without noticing her. But then, his eyes shifted, lingering on the sleeve of her uniform. They traced the path of her scars with deliberate, unsettling focus. He didn't flinch, didn't blink too quickly. The air seemed to thicken. The usual snickers, whispers, and bravado that accompanied Maria's presence vanished instantly. Even the boldest mockers faltered, unsure of what they were witnessing. Time slowed. Maria's heart beat steadily, a rhythm she had learned to control through drills, endurance runs, and years of silent survival. She had expected ridicule, whispering, doubt but not recognition, not like this. His gaze was not just notice. It was comprehension, acknowledgement, a quiet demand for understanding from anyone who dared laugh again. "Where did you get those, Marine?" His voice was low but carried across the yard. It was the kind of question that didn't require an answer. It demanded truth, a recognition of history. Maria froze for a heartbeat, then answered, "House fire, sir. I was 12. Got my family out." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Every recruit held their breath, some staring at the ground, others at Maria, finally understanding that this was no ordinary story, no trivial remark. The general's jaw tightened. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he studied her scars, as though tracing the path of the fire, as though seeing not just raised tissue, but the events, the pain, the courage that had shaped her. The weight of his gaze made the sun feel hotter, the air heavier, the moment monumental. Finally, he spoke. Courage doesn't always wear medals. Sometimes it wears scars. The words hung in the air like a decree. Laughter, whispers, and mockery evaporated as though they had never existed. Maria felt her chest rise with quiet relief, though she did not smile. This wasn't triumph in the conventional sense. It was recognition. The kind that could silence entire ranks, that could transform fear, doubt, and ridicule into respect. Around her, the atmosphere shifted. The recruits who had once sneered now stared at the ground, shame flickering across their faces. The boldest of them, the ones who had laughed the loudest, avoided her gaze, their bravado crumbling in the face of authority and truth. Maria realized, in that moment, that respect was a currency earned over time, forged in trials and paid in silent endurance. It wasn't given lightly, and it wasn't given based on charm or appearances. It was won, often quietly, and sometimes painfully. The general stepped closer. He didn't touch her, didn't offer a handshake or a smile. None of that was necessary. His acknowledgement was in his presence, in the weight of attention, in the recognition of her strength and survival. Maria stood straighter, not from pride, but from understanding. This was validation, not from peers, not from friends, but from someone who held authority and had truly seen her. The drill sergeant, usually quick to bark and reprimand, stayed silent. He knew better than to interrupt. He knew the lesson unfolding in front of the formation was beyond his usual scope. The young recruits around her shifted uncomfortably, absorbing the power of what they had just witnessed. One of the Marines who had mocked her most boldly stepped back, uncertain. For the first time, Maria noticed fear mingled with respect in their eyes. She didn't feel vindictive satisfaction. She simply held her position, letting the silence do the work. Words were unnecessary. Her actions and her story had spoken. The general's attention lingered for a few more heartbeats. Then he nodded, subtle but deliberate. "Carry on," he said to the formation. The command released the tension in the yard, but its echo remained. The meaning of his words, the acknowledgement of survival, resilience, and courage would linger far longer than the echoes of the drill sergeant's orders. As the recruits resumed their drills, Maria felt the difference immediately. Whispers had stopped. Stares no longer carried ridicule, but, in some cases, a hesitant admiration. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't just surviving alongside them, she was setting a standard, embodying a kind of courage that couldn't be mocked. Later, during the scheduled weapons drill, the same recruit who had made a point of taunting her all week approached cautiously. He didn't speak at first, just watched her work, noting the precision, the steadiness, the confidence. Finally, he muttered, "I didn't know." Maria didn't respond. She didn't need to. The demonstration of skill, endurance, and calm composure under scrutiny had spoken louder than words. She continued her task, methodically cleaning and inspecting, scars on her arm catching the light with subtle prominence, a silent testament to battles won long before this drill ground existed. By the evening, word had spread through the barracks. The general's recognition had transformed more than just Maria's position in their eyes. It had shifted the culture, even slightly. The mocking jokes had disappeared. The whispers had grown softer, more uncertain. Maria, for the first time, felt a sense of belonging, not because she had compromised, not because she had softened, but because her truth had finally been seen and understood by someone who mattered. Night fell, and Maria returned to her bunk, physically exhausted, but emotionally steady. She traced her scars in the dim light, feeling the faint ridges beneath her fingertips. She had carried the weight of this history alone for years, and now, in the presence of authority that truly recognized the meaning of her survival, she felt a quiet, steadfast pride. She thought back to the fire, the screams, the hospital bed, the doctors who doubted her recovery. Every scar was a story, a victory, a memory of resilience. And now, even these young Marines, who had once laughed and whispered, were learning the same lesson she had always known. Strength isn't measured by appearances or superficial bravado. Strength is often quiet, scarred, and endured in silence, until the world finally notices. Maria curled onto her bunk, exhaustion weighing heavy, but her mind was alive with anticipation. She knew the road ahead would still be grueling. There would be more challenges, more tests, more moments where her scars would be scrutinized or misunderstood. But she also knew that she had reached a turning point, a moment where her past and present converged, and the respect she had long earned in silence was finally acknowledged. And for the first time in a long time, Maria slept with a sense of calm purpose, knowing the battles she fought weren't invisible. They were witnessed. They mattered. The sun had climbed higher, its rays striking the parade ground with relentless intensity, making the polished boots glint and the fatigues shimmer with heat. Every recruit stood at attention, sweating under the weight of uniform and anticipation, but none felt it more acutely than Maria Martinez. The memory of the general's gaze yesterday lingered in her mind like a persistent echo, a reminder that something monumental had begun to shift in the way she was perceived. The yard was alive with quiet tension. Even the drill sergeant moved differently, walking with deliberate caution, as though aware that the usual order of things had been altered. Whispers had mostly disappeared, replaced by awkward silence. Some Marines avoided her gaze entirely, while others studied her with a mixture of curiosity, hesitation, and unexpectedly, respect. Maria kept her eyes straight ahead. She didn't smile, didn't boast. She had learned that recognition meant more when it came quietly, earned through action and endurance rather than words or charm. Her scars, twisting like pale rivers across her forearm, caught the morning light, subtle but impossible to ignore. They were no longer symbols of ridicule. They were emblems of survival. The general approached, his boots striking the asphalt. With methodical precision, each step resonating with authority. His metals glinted, catching the sun, and his eyes, sharp and unblinking, scanned the formation. Maria felt the weight of those eyes settle on her once more, a quiet pressure that demanded composure. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself, letting every muscle find tension in the right places. He stopped in front of her, a few paces closer than protocol usually allowed. Every recruit nearby stiffened, instinctively aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Even the drill sergeant, who had seen hundreds of recruits over decades, remained silent. The presence of true authority, of someone who understood the cost of survival and the strength it demanded, was palpable. The general's gaze lingered on her scars, tracing the raised ridges, like he could see the moments of fire, panic, and bravery etched into her skin. Maria held his stare without flinching. She had faced fire, flames that had consumed everything around her and almost everything inside her. This was different. This was observation, judgment, and acknowledgement all at once. Marine Martinez. The general's voice was low, but carried across the yard, sharp enough to still hearts. Tell me, when you look at those scars, what do you see? Maria blinked once, collecting herself. Her mind briefly drifted back to the fire, the smoke, the heat, her little brother's terrified face. She felt the memory as vividly as if it were happening again. She drew a slow, steady breath. I see survival, sir, she answered firmly. I see the battles I fought and the family I saved. I see the strength I needed to endure and the courage it took to move forward every day after. The general's eyes did not waver. For a moment, he simply observed, as if absorbing the depth of her truth. Then he nodded, a subtle but meaningful gesture. Courage doesn't always wear medals, he said, echoing what he had told the formation the day before. Sometimes it wears scars. And sometimes it teaches those around you what strength truly looks like. A ripple of realization passed through the recruits. The ones who had mocked her now shifted uneasily, their bravado evaporating. They understood, though perhaps not fully. Respect was no longer optional. It had been commanded by the weight of truth and authority. One recruit, the one who had been her loudest critic, swallowed hard and muttered, almost under his breath. I didn't realize. His words trailed off. There was no excuse, no quick recovery from the revelation that someone he had ridiculed had endured something far beyond his understanding. The general addressed the formation as a whole, his voice calm but authoritative. Every Marine in this formation must understand something fundamental. Strength is not always visible. Some battles are fought in silence, some victories are unseen, and some warriors wear the evidence of those battles on their skin. Marine Martinez has faced fire, pain, and doubt as she stands before you, not just intact, but unbroken. The yard was silent save for the distant call of seagulls and the faint wind brushing across the asphalt. Even the sun seemed to pause, highlighting the moment with harsh, unflinching clarity. Maria felt the weight of it, the power of acknowledgement, and the subtle shift of energy around her. This was more than recognition. It was a lesson. Some recruits lowered their heads, ashamed. Others glanced sideways at Maria, the first hints of admiration appearing. She noticed it, but did not react. Her focus remained steadfast, grounded in the knowledge that her scars had always been proof, whether seen or unseen. The general took a few steps closer, speaking now directly to the unit. Let this be clear. Mockery, ridicule, and judgment, based on what you do not understand, have no place here. Strength comes in many forms. It can be quiet, it can be hidden, and it can be endured long before it is witnessed. Learn from this Marine. Learn from her resilience, her discipline, and her courage. And carry it with you in every step you take as a Marine. Whispers were gone. Stares were steady. The formation felt transformed. Maria sensed it, the invisible barrier of judgment that had followed her since day one had begun to dissolve. Even the recruits who had whispered cruel jokes now seemed smaller in comparison, their previous arrogance diminished. The general's eyes returned to Maria, lingering just long enough to communicate understanding, respect, and authority without a single word. Maria stood, breathing steady, feeling her scars under the sunlight as if they had been illuminated for the first time. They were no longer marks of vulnerability. They were symbols of endurance, proof that she had survived and continued to. Rise. Dismissed, the general finally said, his voice cutting through the yard with finality. The sound of boots echoing across asphalt returned as the formation relaxed slightly, but the lesson had been cemented. Respect was not requested. It was earned through action, endured through trials, and validated by truth. Later that day, in the barracks, Maria unpacked her gear quietly. The previous teasing recruits approached, hesitant but determined. Marine. Martinez. One began, voice low. We just wanted to say. Maria raised a hand gently. I heard you, she said, calm but unwavering. Actions matter more than words. Prove yourself through what you do. That's all that matters. Here. They nodded, a mixture of relief and acknowledgement, understanding finally dawning. Maria didn't need more. She had already demonstrated her strength and resilience, and now the general had confirmed what she had always known. Survival and courage were worth more than mockery or fleeting laughter. The afternoon brought more drills. Maria's pace was steady, her movements deliberate, her body conditioned by weeks of endurance and discipline. Every step, every motion, was observed not with skepticism, but with curiosity, sometimes admiration. The unit seemed different now, subtly shifted by the recognition of one Marine's courage and the authority who validated it. During a water break, one recruit approached cautiously, his eyes avoiding direct contact. I didn't understand before. I thought. Maria shook her head slightly. You thought wrong. It's okay. Now, prove it through your actions. That's all that counts. The words hung in the humid air. Silence followed, comfortable this time, a quiet acknowledgement of change. As evening fell, Maria lay on her bunk, tracing her scars under the dim barracks light. She thought of the fire, of the hospital bed, of her younger siblings, and of the Marines who had once mocked her. The general's words echoed in her mind. Courage sometimes wears scars. And now, for the first time, she felt the weight of acknowledgement. Not just in her heart, but in the eyes of those around her. The journey was far from over, but this moment, this validation, was a milestone she would carry forward. She realized then that survival was only part of the battle. True strength required patience, endurance, and the quiet fortitude to continue even when the world doubted you. And with the general's recognition, she understood that her story, her scars, and her resilience would no longer be invisible. They would speak for themselves, demanding respect, shaping perception, and inspiring courage. As sleep came, Maria felt a profound calm. She had faced ridicule, whispers, and doubt, yet emerged stronger, steadier, and ready. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new endurance tests, and new drills. But she was no longer merely enduring. She was commanding attention through her quiet strength, her scars now a symbol, not of shame, but of power. And she knew that nothing, no mockery, no challenge, could ever take that away. The sun rose again over Camp Leoin, hot and unrelenting. But Maria Martinez hardly noticed. Her mind was focused, her body conditioned, her resolve unwavering. The events of the previous days, the inspection, the general's recognition, had shifted something in the barracks. Whispers of mockery had all but vanished, replaced by a careful, watchful curiosity. The young Marines who had once laughed at her scars now measured her movements with a subtle admiration that made her feel a quiet sense of satisfaction. She stepped onto the parade ground, boots hitting the asphalt in time with the rhythmic clatter of her peers. Today was another day of grueling drills, obstacle courses, and endurance tests. Maria had learned that respect was not permanent. It was earned daily through persistence, courage, and performance. And she intended to earn it in full. The drill sergeant barked orders, sharp and precise. Formation. Today, you lead each other in drills. Pay attention, follow commands, and maintain discipline. You will move as one unit. Any mistakes, any hesitation, and you'll answer to me personally. Maria took her place at the front of her squad. The ones who had once mocked her now followed her movements instinctively. She didn't give orders for recognition. She gave them because she knew the value of precision, timing, and teamwork. Her voice was steady, clear, and unwavering as she instructed them to run formations, climb obstacles, and execute tactical movements. The obstacle course was brutal, as always. High walls, cargo nets, and balance beams tested every ounce of endurance in the young Marines. Maria ran ahead, guiding. Then step by step, offering concise advice when needed, correcting form when a teammate faltered. Her scars, raised and pale against the sun-darkened skin of her forearms, glinted in the light, a silent testament to resilience and endurance. At one particularly tricky section of the course, a tall recruit with a strong build hesitated at the edge of a narrow beam. His arms shook and his confidence wavered. Maria stepped forward. Focus, one step at a time. You've got this, she said calmly. Her voice was firm but encouraging, not condescending. He nodded, took a careful breath, and crossed successfully. Good job, Maria added simply. No applause, no fanfare. Just acknowledgement of effort and skill. That small act, though, earned her more respect than any command shouted from a distance. By midday, the recruits were drenched in sweat, muscles screaming, yet Maria's squad moved with cohesion that was rare for new Marines. Their movements had become synchronized, each Marine watching the others, adjusting in real time, responding to her guidance. Even the recruits who had mocked her before now mirrored her precision, relying on her steadiness rather than testing her patience. During a brief water break, one of the recruits approached cautiously. Marine Martinez, he said, voice low, hesitant. I just wanted to say, thanks for guiding us. I didn't get it before. You're incredible. Maria looked at him without judgment, her expression neutral. I'm not here to impress, she said quietly. I'm here to do the work, and to make sure the team does it right. That's all that matters. He nodded, swallowing hard, understanding that respect was earned, not given, and that Maria had earned it every day with her actions. The afternoon drills continued with relentless intensity. Maria's squad moved efficiently through simulations, mock combat exercises, and endurance runs. She corrected mistakes swiftly, but without anger, offering guidance and demonstration, rather than reprimand. Her presence had become the stabilizing force her peers relied upon, a subtle but powerful form of leadership. During a weapons drill, Maria noticed a recruit struggling with proper handling. His hands shook, and frustration creased his brow. She stepped beside him, demonstrating the correct stance, the grip, the careful movement of the rifle. "Steady," she said simply. "Focus on control, not speed. The rest will follow." He mimicked her motions, gradually steadying, until the instructor nodded in approval. Maria gave a small, satisfied nod of her own. Leadership, she had learned, was not about domination. It was about guiding others to perform at their best, even when doubt or fear threatened to derail them. Later, the squad moved to a mock urban combat exercise, complete with smoke, obstacles, and unexpected challenges designed to test judgment under pressure. Maria's role was to lead, to make split-second decisions, and to ensure the safety and effectiveness of her team. The smoke thickened, visibility dropping, and the recruits hesitated, disoriented by the sudden chaos. Maria's voice cut through. "The haze. Stay low. Cover your sectors. Move together." Her guidance was precise, almost instinctual. She moved through the course with calm authority, signaling teammates, adjusting their positions, and ensuring cohesion. The squad followed her movements, trusting her instinct and her experience, even though she had not yet been in active combat. When the exercise concluded, every recruit in her squad was accounted for, safe and successful in completing the objective. The commanding officers nodded in approval. The recruits themselves looked at Maria differently, now no longer just a survivor of a fire, but a leader, a stabilizing force, and an example of resilience in action. That evening, as the squad returned to the barracks, Maria's footsteps were measured, deliberate. She did not boast, did not seek praise, but the quiet glances and hesitant nods from her peers told her that the perception of her had shifted entirely. The same recruits who had once whispered behind her back now sought her advice, mirrored her movements, and deferred to her guidance in moments of uncertainty. A young recruit approached her, holding his rifle improperly. "Marine. Martinez? Could you show me again?" I want to get it right." Maria took the rifle, demonstrating the stance, the grip, the subtle adjustments needed for accuracy. She handed it back, watching him replicate her movements. "Better," she said simply. "Keep practicing. That's how you improve." He nodded, the humility and eagerness in his eyes telling her more than words ever could. Respect, she realized, was not a single act. It was earned repeatedly, day after day, in every small interaction. That night, Maria sat on her bunk, reflecting on the past week. The journey from ridicule to recognition had not been easy. Every day had demanded discipline, endurance, and emotional fortitude. But she had proven something fundamental, not just to her peers, not just to the general, but to herself. Her scars, once sources of whispered jokes and snide comments, had become symbols of strength, endurance, and resilience. They reminded her of fire, survival, and courage. And now they served as silent proof that strength is not always visible, not always obvious, but undeniable to those who take the time to understand it. She thought about the young Marines around her, their glances of respect and hesitation, their newfound willingness to follow her guidance. Leadership was not about dominance. It was about action, consistency, and integrity. And in that moment, Maria understood that she had earned something far more lasting than temporary approval. She had earned trust. The following days reinforced this new dynamic. Recruits who had mocked her previously now sought her guidance in drills, exercises, and tactical planning. They mirrored her movements, adopted her methods, and respected her decisions. The barracks, once filled with whispered ridicule, now hummed with focused determination, inspired subtly by her example. During a particularly challenging endurance run, Maria noticed a recruit struggling to maintain pace. She slowed slightly, falling into step beside him, and offered quiet encouragement. "Breathe. Steady your pace. Don't quit." He glanced at her, panting, then nodded, finding renewed energy in her presence. Together, they reached the end of the course. Maria didn't celebrate. She simply moved forward, letting actions speak louder than any words. By the end of the week, a transformation was undeniable. The squad moved as a cohesive unit, disciplined and effective. The atmosphere in the barracks had shifted, subtle but profound. Maria's scars, once mocked, had become emblems of endurance and resilience. Her peers no longer questioned her capability. They had witnessed it repeatedly in both drills and interactions. Maria knew the journey was far from over. There would be more tests, more challenges, and moments when her endurance and leadership would be pushed to the limit. But for the first time, she felt the weight of recognition, not just from authority, but from those she trained alongside. Her scars were no longer a source of ridicule. They were symbols of survival, strength, and quiet power. As she lay on her bunk that night, tracing the familiar ridges of her scars, she felt a sense of calm purpose. The battles of the past had shaped her, and the challenges of the present were opportunities to prove that resilience, courage, and leadership are inseparable. And she knew, without doubt, that she was more than capable of meeting whatever came next. The early morning fog clung to the parade ground like a damp veil, softening the outlines of the obstacles and casting long, eerie shadows across the asphalt. The usual sounds of boots striking the ground and commands barking through the air were muted beneath the mist, but Maria Martinez was already moving, her body warm from stretches and mental preparation. She had faced many challenges in the past weeks, but today, she knew, would test her in ways she had never anticipated. The drill sergeant stepped forward, voice sharp and cutting through the haze. Today's challenge is the ultimate test of endurance, precision, and teamwork. The obstacle gauntlet isn't just about physical ability. It's about leadership, focus, and survival. Failure is not an option, and neither is hesitation. You will push past every limit you think you have. Maria's jaw tightened. She had endured flames, ridicule, and countless grueling drills, but the gauntlet was designed to break even the most disciplined recruits. Her scars, twisting down her forearms like a map of survival, felt alive under the morning sun, reminding her of everything she had endured and everything she still had to prove. The gauntlet began with a long sprint across uneven terrain, punctuated by hurdles, mud pits, and climbing walls. Maria led her squad with measured steps, offering quiet guidance when needed. Her voice was calm but firm, cutting through the strain in a way that commanded attention. "Keep your pace, watch your footing, and communicate," she instructed. "We move as one. No one falls behind." Her squad responded instinctively, moving with a cohesion that was rare for new recruits. Every stumble was corrected, every hesitation addressed, not with anger, but with instruction. Maria's leadership was not loud. It was quiet, precise, and effective. As they approached the first wall, a towering structure of wood and rope, several recruits faltered. Their hands shook, adrenaline mingling with fatigue, making each grip uncertain. Maria moved first, her arms pulling her up with controlled strength, legs finding footholds instinctively. At the top, she looked down and extended a hand to the struggling recruits. "Trust your hands. Trust your strength. Trust me," she said simply. One by one, they followed her lead, climbing with growing confidence. The act was small, almost routine, but it earned her more than admiration. It earned unwavering trust. The gauntlet's next challenge was the mud crawl, a narrow trench filled with thick, cold mud that threatened to suck boots and uniform alike. Maria descended carefully, her body low, pushing forward with deliberate force. Her squad followed, some faltering, some grimacing at the relentless discomfort. "Focus on forward motion," she encouraged. "Each inch counts. Don't fight the mud, move with it." By the time they emerged from the crawl, mud dripping from every seam and joint, Maria's uniform was nearly unrecognizable, but her expression remained steady. Exhaustion pressed against her muscles, but her resolve was unbroken. She had survived worse, endured longer, and now she guided her squad through the gauntlet with calm authority. The final challenge was the rope climb, followed by a balance beam, crossing over a simulated pit. The ropes were slick with water, the beam narrow, and the pit below intimidating. Maria's forearms burned, her legs trembled, but she climbed steadily. Scars pressing against the fabric of her sleeves, a constant reminder of resilience. At the top, she steadied herself, scanning her squad below. One recruit froze, fear overtaking judgment. Maria's eyes met his, and she called down calmly, "Breathe, one step at a time. I've got you." We moved together. He nodded, gripping the rope, and climbed with newfound determination. The beam crossing was nerve-wracking, each step demanding balance and precision. Maria moved slowly, deliberately, setting an example for those following. When the last recruit made it safely across, the gauntlet was complete. Exhaustion weighed on them all, but there was no time to rest. The drill sergeant barked new orders, testing endurance with additional laps, weighted runs, and coordination drills. Maria's squad moved in unison, their trust in her guidance evident in every motion. By late afternoon, the sun had descended, casting long shadows across the yard. Sweat and grime coated every recruit, muscles ached, and fatigue was universal. Yet Maria's squad had completed the gauntlet with no injuries, no missteps, and minimal hesitation. The commanding officers, watching closely, nodded in approval, impressed not only with their performance, but with the evident leadership that had guided them. Even the recruits, who had once mocked Maria, now approached her with cautious reverence. "I didn't think we could do it," one admitted, voice low and awed. Maria simply nodded. "You did it because you trusted yourselves, and you trusted the team. That's what makes a difference. Strength isn't individual, it's collective. Never forget that." That evening, in the barracks, Maria reflected on the day's trials. Each scar, each ridge on her forearms, felt like a symbol of everything she had endured. Not just fire or ridicule, but every challenge that had shaped her resilience and discipline. The young Marines around her, now accustomed to following her lead, were engaged in their routines with a new seriousness. Maria didn't demand attention. She earned it through consistency, calm authority, and the example she set with every motion, every decision. A recruit approached quietly, hesitant but determined. "Marine Martinez, I just wanted to say, you made me believe I could do it. I never thought I had it in me." Maria looked at him without judgment. "You had it in you all along," she replied. "I just helped you see it. Remember that. Trust yourself." The interaction was brief, but its impact was significant. Leadership, Maria realized, was measured not in commands, but in empowerment. She had proven that scars, endurance, and quiet strength could inspire action, respect, and courage in others. The next day brought additional challenges, this time a simulated urban combat exercise. Smoke machines filled the yard with thick, disorienting fog, while obstacles, hidden tripwires, and sudden commands tested focus and coordination. Maria moved through the exercise with precision, guiding her squad, correcting mistakes, and maintaining composure. "Cover your sectors. Communicate. Stay low," she called, moving ahead to direct positions. Her voice was calm, authoritative, and focused. The squad responded immediately, their movements synchronized, disciplined, and efficient. When the exercise concluded successfully, the commanding officers were visibly impressed. Maria's squad had not only completed the tasks, but had done so with remarkable cohesion and leadership, all guided by a Marine who had once been the target of ridicule. The message was clear. Maria Martinez's scars were no longer symbols of vulnerability. They were badges of endurance, strength, and authority. Her peers had learned, through observation and experience, that resilience was more valuable than arrogance, and guidance more important than mockery, even in moments of quiet. Maria's influence was evident. In the barracks, recruits sought her advice on drills, tactics, and endurance. Her scars, once the subject of ridicule, had become an emblem of authority. They represented survival, courage, and the ability to overcome impossible odds. Maria herself remained modest, focusing not on recognition, but on the next challenge, the next obstacle, the next lesson to impart. Every drill, every instruction, every corrective movement was an opportunity to teach endurance, precision, and courage. She understood now that her scars were more than physical reminders. They were tools for leadership. They spoke without words, demonstrating the strength, discipline, and resilience required to lead and inspire. By the end of the week, the transformation in her squad was complete. Respect had replaced ridicule. Trust had replaced hesitation. Her leadership was unquestioned, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it through action, discipline, and enduring example. Maria lay on her bunk that night, tracing her scars under the dim light. They felt different now, not reminders of pain, but symbols of achievement. Every ridge, every curve, every mark told a story of fire, endurance, leadership, and courage. They were proof that she had survived, thrived, and inspired others to do the same. She thought of the future, of the challenges yet to come, and of the Marines she now led by example. The road ahead was long, grueling, and uncertain, but Maria Martinez knew she was ready. Her scars, her endurance, and her unwavering resolve had prepared her for anything. And with that realization, she finally allowed herself a small, quiet smile. The sun rose sluggishly over Camp Leoing, casting an orange glow across the asphalt. Maria Martinez had long since learned to wait before the day, her body conditioned to rise before exhaustion and mental fatigue could claim her. But today, something heavier than the morning fog weighed on her chest. It wasn't the physical strain of drills or endurance tests. No, today carried a different kind of trial, one that would test her courage, not in action, but in judgment and empathy. The commanding officer had called for a special exercise. The order was simple yet ambiguous. Today, you will confront challenges that test your leadership beyond physical limits. Decisions matter. Consequences are real. Your squad will depend on you. Maria felt the weight immediately. The phrasing suggested more than drills, more than obstacle courses. This was a test of moral and emotional fortitude. She met her squad at the parade ground, noting their tired expressions, their bodies marked by sweat and scrapes, but also their trust. They looked to her now not as a peer, not as someone who had survived ridicule, but as a guide, a source of stability. That trust, earned through countless drills in the gauntlet, was fragile and precious. Any misstep today could shatter it. The first part of the exercise began with a simulated crisis. Smoke filled the yard, alarms blared, and instructors shouted unexpected instructions. Your squad must retrieve equipment critical to mission. Success, but only one can carry it at a time. You will choose who moves first. Maria's eyes scanned her team. Each recruit had varying levels of strength and endurance, and several were already near exhaustion. She knew the decision would matter. Pick poorly, and morale could crumble. Pick wisely, and they would all succeed together. She called out, "Private Reynolds, you're up first. Step forward. Focus, and I'll guide you." Reynolds hesitated, fear and fatigue flickering across his face. Maria caught his gaze. "I believe in you. One step at a time, and the team moves with you." He nodded, swallowing hard, and moved forward. His motion was careful, deliberate, but Maria's calm guidance steadied him. One by one, recruits followed, her judgment balancing fairness, encouragement, and tactical logic. By the end of the exercise, every member had contributed, no one was left behind, and the squad completed the mission successfully. The next challenge was more personal. Each recruit had to disclose a moment of doubt, fear, or failure, something that had tested them emotionally. Maria had seen her squad develop confidence and discipline, but she knew that vulnerability was a different kind of test. Many struggled to speak, their eyes downcast, faces flushed with shame or uncertainty. Maria led by example. "I'll go first," she said, her voice steady. She recounted the fire from her childhood, the panic, the fear, the moments when survival seemed impossible. She spoke of the hospital bed, of the doubts she had faced from others and from herself, and of a long journey toward acceptance and resilience. Her scars traced her words with silent eloquence. The recruits listened, rapt and silent, absorbing not just the story, but the courage it took to speak it aloud. Maria's openness encouraged the others. Slowly, each recruit began to share, their voices trembling, but growing stronger with each sentence. Fear and shame were replaced with trust and solidarity. By the end of the session, the squad had bonded more deeply than any drill or endurance test could achieve. Maria had shown them that leadership was not just about giving orders or demonstrating skill. It was about honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to face one's own fears while guiding others. That evening, a sudden storm rolled in, thunder, cracking across the camp as heavy rain began to fall. The recruits were called to complete an emergency evacuation drill, moving equipment and personnel under simulated combat conditions. Visibility was low, footing treacherous, and the wind howled like a predator testing their resolve. Maria led them through the mud-soaked yard with calm determination. Her voice carried over the roar of rain and wind. "Keep low. Stay together. Watch each other." One recruit slipped, sliding dangerously toward a puddle that could have caused serious injury. Maria was immediately there, her hand steadying him, her presence unwavering. "I've got you. Move with me," she said. Her composure in the chaos inspired trust, even fear into determination. The squad moved as a single unit, following her example, until every member was safe and accounted for. After the storm, the commanding officers gathered the squad. Their faces were solemn but approving. Maria's performance and the cohesion, resilience, and courage she had fostered in her team was exceptional. The officers noted her leadership, the trust her squad had developed, and the way her scars, once mocked, now served as powerful symbols of endurance and inspiration. Maria stood quietly, her eyes reflecting fatigue, rain, and the subtle pride that came from guiding others. The commanding officer spoke directly to her. "Maureen Martinez, your leadership today was exemplary. You not only guided your squad through extreme conditions, but instilled trust, courage, and discipline. Your scars are no longer just a mark of survival. They are an emblem of leadership." Her chest rose with measured pride. She had earned recognition beyond physical performance. She had earned it in moral authority and emotional resilience. In the following days, Maria continued to face exercises designed to test more than endurance. Scenarios challenged judgment under pressure, empathy for struggling recruits, and strategic thinking in unpredictable conditions. Each time she relied not just on her physical strength, but on experience, foresight, and her ability to connect with others. Her scars were now more than physical marks. They were teaching tools. New recruits, once intimidated by her past, now approached her openly, seeking advice, guidance, and mentorship. Her story of survival had become a lesson in courage and resilience, one that transcended mockery and fear. One evening, after an exhausting series of drills, Maria noticed a recruit sitting alone, head down, shoulders slumped. He had been struggling with a series of exercises, his confidence shaken. Without a word, Maria sat beside him, letting the silence stretch before speaking. "You're stronger than you think," she said quietly. "You've faced fear before, and you've overcome it. This isn't different. Trust yourself. One step at a time." The recruit looked up, eyes wet with fatigue and emotion. He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Maria didn't offer false encouragement. She offered truth, resilience, and belief in his capacity to endure. By the end of the night, he was ready to join the next exercise with renewed determination. Leadership, Maria understood, wasn't about commanding fearlessly. It was about cultivating courage, trust, and endurance in others. Her scars, her history, and her actions gave her the authority to do so. The culmination of the week was a multi-stage endurance exercise, combining elements of physical, mental, and moral challenge. The recruits were tested on obstacle navigation, tactical decision-making, and crisis management under simulated combat conditions. Maria led with a balance of authority and empathy, guiding her squad through each stage with precision and calm determination. During the final stage, a simulated casualty forced a critical decision. One recruit had to be evacuated, while the rest continued under her leadership. Maria's judgment was decisive yet compassionate, balancing mission success with the safety and morale of her squad. Her decision inspired trust, demonstrating that leadership required both courage and ethical judgment. By the time the exercise concluded, the commanding officers and instructors were unanimous. Maria had proven her resilience, leadership, and moral authority beyond any doubt. Her scars, once laughed at, were now respected, a visible testament to her courage and endurance. That night, as the camp settled into quiet, Maria reflected on the week's challenges. She had faced physical, mental, and moral trials, guiding her squad through each with unwavering focus. The young Marine's Elide had grown stronger, more disciplined, and more trusting under her example. Her scars, etched from a childhood fire that had nearly claimed her life, had transformed from sources of ridicule to symbols of strength, resilience, and leadership. She realized that true courage was not just surviving, but guiding others through their fears and teaching them to trust in themselves. Maria lay on her bunk, feeling the familiar ridges beneath her fingers. She had faced ridicule, exhaustion, and doubt, and emerged not only intact, but stronger, more confident, and more influential than ever. The recognition of her courage and leadership was no longer a fleeting moment. It had become the foundation of her identity within the Marine Corps. She knew that challenges would continue. Physical tests would become harder, moral dilemmas more complex, and leadership demands heavier. But she also knew that her scars, her experiences, and her resilience had prepared her for anything. And in that quiet moment, Maria Martinez understood a profound truth. Survival had given her life, but endurance, courage, and leadership had given her purpose. The sun had just begun to rise over Camp Lejeune, its first rays painting the parade ground with gold and warmth. Maria Martinez stood at attention, her uniform spotless despite the weeks of grueling training, her scars visible in the morning light, a symbol not of weakness but of triumph. Today was different. Today was the day that the culmination of her endurance, leadership, and courage would be recognized in a way she had never imagined. Word had spread through the camp. The commanding officers had requested the presence of the general who first noticed Maria's scars. His arrival meant more than inspection. It meant acknowledgement at the highest level. The Marines around her, including those who had once mocked her, stood taller, their whispers replaced by respectful silence. Maria's squad formed behind her, disciplined and orderly. Each recruit carried themselves with a new sense of purpose, shaped by her leadership and example. The drill sergeant, usually strict and unyielding, gave her a subtle nod of approval. Maria felt a small but steady surge of pride. She had earned not only recognition from authority, but the respect of her peers. The general approached, his boots striking the asphalt with deliberate authority. His eyes, sharp and unflinching, scanned the formation, landing finally on Maria. For a moment, he said nothing, letting the weight of his gaze settle on her. Then, with measured steps, he stopped in front of her. "Marine Martinez," he began, voice carrying across the formation. "I have watched you since you arrived at this base. I have observed not only your physical endurance, but your moral strength, your ability to lead, and the way you inspire those around you. Your scars, once a source of ridicule, have become symbols of courage and resilience that others now strive to emulate." The words resonated with Maria, a deep affirmation of the journey she had endured. Her scars, raised and pale, had always reminded her of survival. Now they reflected triumph, acknowledgement, and respect. The general continued, addressing the squad as a whole. "Take note, Marines. Courage is not always measured by physical feats alone. True courage is visible in endurance, leadership, and the ability to guide others through adversity. Marine Martinez embodies these qualities. You would do well to learn from her example." A hush settled over the yard. Even the seagulls seemed to pause in the morning sky. Maria felt the tension break, replaced by quiet pride and a sense of purpose deeper than any accolade. She realized that this recognition was not about herself alone. It was about the lives she had touched, the recruits she had guided, and the example she had set. A next exercise was a coordinated mission scenario, designed to test not just skill, but judgment, teamwork, and leadership under pressure. Maria led her squad through a series of complex maneuvers, from navigating simulated urban terrain to coordinating rescues and securing strategic objectives. Every decision she made reflected the lessons learned through weeks of endurance, emotional challenges, and moral dilemmas. When the final objective was reached, the squad had completed every task flawlessly. Their movements were precise, their coordination seamless, their morale unwavering. The commanding officers, alongside the general, watched in admiration. Maria's leadership had transformed her squad into a cohesive, disciplined, and effective unit. The recruits who had once whispered cruel jokes now looked at her with awe and respect. They had witnessed the transformation firsthand and understood the depth of her strength. Maria's scars were no longer a source of ridicule. They were emblems of inspiration. Later, in the barracks, Maria was approached by a group of recruits who had once mocked her relentlessly. Their expressions were tentative, hesitant, but sincere. "Marine Martinez," one began, voice low, We owe you an apology. We didn't understand before. We were wrong." Maria looked at them quietly, acknowledging their courage in admitting fault. "Apologies are unnecessary," she said calmly. "Actions speak louder than words. Show me through your efforts, your discipline, and your leadership that you have learned. That's how you honor what we've accomplished together." They nodded, understanding that respect and trust were earned, and that Maria had already demonstrated the qualities they now aspired to. The evening brought the final ceremony. Maria stood in formation as the general approached, medals glinting in the fading sunlight. The squad behind her mirrored her composure, reflecting the discipline, trust, and cohesion she had instilled. In them, the general addressed the gathered Marines. Today, we honor a Marine whose courage, resilience, and leadership have set an example for all. Marine Martinez has endured trials that would have broken others. She has faced ridicule, adversity, and extreme physical challenges. Yet she stands before us, not just intact, but as a guiding light for her peers. He paused, letting the words resonate. Her scars tell the story of survival, endurance, and courage. They are not marks of weakness, they are emblems of triumph. And leadership. Marines, take note. Learn from her example. Embrace the challenges that shape you. And remember that true courage is measured not by what you overcome alone, but by how you inspire others along the way. The general stepped forward and saluted Maria. Marine Martinez, it is my honor to recognize you for your extraordinary courage and leadership. You have set a standard that all Marines should strive to meet. Maria returned the salute, her posture steady, her heart swelling with pride. The acknowledgement from the highest level of authority was a culmination of weeks of struggle, endurance, and unwavering resolve. Her scars, once a source of mockery, had become a testament to her strength and leadership. After the ceremony, Maria returned to her squad. The young Marines who had once laughed at her now surrounded her with respect and admiration. Marine Martinez once said quietly, "Thank you for everything. You've taught us more than any drill or obstacle ever could." Maria smiled softly. "You've taught yourselves. I just guided the way. Remember that. Leadership isn't about one person. It's about everyone moving together, trusting each other, and striving to be better." The squad nodded, a deep sense of understanding passing among them. Maria had not only led them through physical challenges, but had shown them the importance of courage, resilience, and integrity. That night, Maria sat quietly on her bunk, tracing her scars under the dim barracks light. She thought of the fire, of the hospital bed, of the ridicule she had endured, and of the general who had first acknowledged her courage. Every moment had led to this, the culmination of trials, leadership, and personal growth. Her scars no longer represented pain or vulnerability. They were emblems of survival, symbols of endurance, and badges of leadership. They told a story that words could never fully capture, a story of courage, resilience, and the power of inspiring others through strength and integrity. Maria realized that her journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new tests of endurance and leadership. But she was ready. Her scars had prepared her for anything, not just the physical trials, but the moral and emotional challenges that define true courage. As sleep finally came, Maria felt a profound sense of peace. She had faced ridicule, fire, exhaustion, and doubt, yet emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and more capable than ever. Her story, etched in scars and actions, had become a lesson for all who witnessed it, a testament to the enduring power of resilience, courage, and leadership. And in that quiet moment, Maria Martinez understood something deeper than recognition or respect. She had transformed her past, her pain, and her scars into a legacy that would inspire others long after her time at the camp. Her journey from ridicule to reverence was complete. Her scars were no longer a secret, no longer a source of shame. They were a story of triumph, endurance, and extraordinary courage. And as she closed her eyes, Maria knew, without doubt, that she had earned her place among the Marines, not merely through survival, but through unwavering strength, leadership, and the power to inspire those who would follow.